Hey guys, Brett here with Springport Wealth Inc. And we're spearheading a wealth movement where ordinary people get to lead extraordinary lives through real estate investing. And it's our mission to help you do the same. Today in conversation we have Shane Melanson, who's a multifamily syndicator and developer doing big things, and he's helping people within his sphere do the same. In our conversation we cover a few various topics such as how to keep yourself accountable to your investment partners, how to make sure that you do whatever it takes to ensure the deal is a success, and to make sure you're working with the right investment partners. Even if they're bringing money, you want to make sure that they're adding instead of subtracting to the deal, and various other topics that will help you grow your portfolio. So sit back, relax, grab a notepad, take some notes, and as always, if you find the information helpful, I'd be greatly honored if you like and subscribe. So thank you so much for joining me, and let's get to it. Hey guys, Brett here, Springport Wealth Inc. Today, a special guest in-house, another Calgary person. We have with us Shane Melanson. And for those who don't know about Shane, I'm just going to give you a quick, brief synopsis of his history and background before we ask him to dig a little bit more into it himself. He's a dad, first and foremost, a husband, a developer, real estate investor, and cash flow specialist. He's also an author of a book called Club Syndication that you'll be able to pick up. I'll put a link for this book for you to be able to pick up this book after the video. And he's also has a podcast called The Investing Advantage. He calls it The Investing Advantage because it's a community that he commandeers. It's basically a set of tools and resources for high income earning professionals and entrepreneurs looking to secure their retirement plan. And for the past 14 years, he's been focused on helping people take control over their investments and owning commercial real estate across Canada and the US. He does this by helping them identify the right commercial properties in the right locations at the right time. And he has returned his partners and clients tens of millions in cash flow and profits. And he's now focused on helping other professional real estate investors just like yourself do the same. So please, everybody out there in virtual land, help me welcome Shane Melanson. Thanks, Shane.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here.
Pleasure to have you, and thanks again for doing this. It's much appreciated. We're honored.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So I just wanted to jump in real quick to talk about kind of your story. Everybody always wants to know how people got where they are. You're a successful syndicator. So for people who don't know about you, give them a little bit of a backstory about who you are.
Sure. So, I mean, I don't know how far back to go, but I'll kind of start like, I wasn't kind of born into the world of commercial real estate or doing syndications. Both my parents were teachers. My dad, the principal, my mom, a grade 1 teacher. Grew up in a small town, Boycott, Alberta. And, back then it was all about working hard and saving my money, if you will. And, I did that. My dad at a very young age put me on a strict budget where I would basically lay out all my expenses for the year. And then he would write me a check in September and say, this has got to last you the entire year. That included haircuts, birthday presents, Christmas gifts, hockey equipment, you name it, right? And so it's interesting as I kind of think back on those days, but I didn't like that. I didn't like being constrained to a budget. And I would usually blow through it in like 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And so I, got paper routes and started to make my own income, if you will, or money.
Right.
So fast forward, I go to university. I would go back in the summer and build logging roads. That's what I would do in the summers to make money to be able to pay for university.
Okay.
The first year back, I worked the whole summer, saved up about $13,500. And the gentleman that I worked for, it was his father that I worked for building these logging roads.
Right.
And the son was kind of an entrepreneur and always doing, various deals. And he was a good buddy of mine.
Yeah.
Anyways, he brings an opportunity to invest. And so I invested everything I'd saved that summer. My dad saved or refinanced his house to the tune of about $100,000 to invest in this opportunity. And, we really didn't know what we were doing. We had no prior investing experience aside from, buying stocks and shares and whatnot. Long story short, we lost all that money. And so, as a 19-year-old, that's painful, but to see your parents lose that much, it's, that really left a impression on me, if you will. And so I was very distrustful of investing with others. I thought they were all, for the most part, a scam. Anyway, so what that did was I basically said, okay, I'm going to start working and saving money, and I'm just going to that's how I'm going to get wealthy. Well, I can tell you that you can only work so many hours. You can only work so hard. And sure, I did reasonably well as a 20-year-old going to university. But my friend at the time, who had moved from Whitecourt, dropped out of university, he was working in the bars and he was buying investment properties. I think he was a member at Rain at the time. And his dad would basically joint venture with him. And he had 4 or 5 properties and he was living rent free, right? I'm in the basement. I had a few other friends that were living with him. And I just thought this is craziness, that, he's really generating money without doing anything. And so I decided to pick up a few books, Robert Kiyosaki. I think that's probably one that most people read, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, some of Don Campbell's books. And I was kind of introduced to the idea of investing in real estate. I went out, bought my first property, and, since then I ended up, I can talk about all the different deals, but for about 3 years, I just fixed and flipped, bought rentals, built spec homes, and got a job at Sun Life Financial where I started to learn about commercial real estate. I remember one time these 2 guys came in and they were doing syndications. I'd never heard of a syndication before. I didn't really know what it was about. And they were kind of in their mid 40s and they were in the commercial real estate world. And what they were doing is they were raising about $3 million, if I remember correctly, to buy their first property, right? And so essentially what they would do is they would go out to their network of people that they knew, friends and family, high net worth investors. And, they bought this property, then they bought another property. And, in my 3 years I was there, these guys had assembled probably $50 million plus in commercial real estate in a short amount of time. I didn't know how to do it. And so it wasn't until I met my father-in-law, Andy, that I was really kind of brought behind the curtains to be able to see, okay, this is how you find, these are the right deals to find. These are how you talk to investors. This is the pitch deck. This is the structure. This is the legal framework. And so that was probably 2008, I believe, is when I first started to do syndications.
Oh, yeah.
And so I did that with my father-in-law for about 7 or 8 years. And then we kind of, he was focused on his family business. And so I started to do my own syndications on my own. And that's the, long, short story, if you will.
Yeah. Just to clarify, for those who don't know, what exactly, in your terms, what is a syndicator?
Yeah.
Tell people a little bit better about
Sure.
that.
The way I define a syndicator is you are essentially pooling money from accredited investors to invest into one specific deal, right? So people are probably familiar with like a MIC, right? A mortgage investment corporation, right? Well, those are typically syndicated pools of money to invest in multiple mortgages, right? So when I'm talking about doing a syndicated deal, I find a specific property. Let's just say it's just for easy math, $10 million. I need to raise $3 million. So I'll go out to, 30 investors at $100,000 each. They come in, I'm the general partner, they're limited partners, meaning their exposure is their money they put in. And then we arrange some sort of a deal structure where they'll likely get some sort of a preferred return. And then in exchange for me putting the deal together, I'll earn certain fees and performance-based money splits on the back end.
Right. Okay. Because sometimes people aren't clear, I've noticed, on exactly what a syndicator does, where you fit in. So it's great to know, especially with someone who's been through so many as you have. So that's valuable. So thanks.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of pick your brain on why you like doing multifamily or development style deals. What do you like about it?
Well, this kind of goes to where a person has a skill set. and what their objectives are, right? And so for me, one of the key philosophies I have is that I always have to justify my existence in a deal. And so that generally means I'm bringing value in the deal in some capacity. That might be vacancy, that might be ground up development, that might be rezoning, that might be raising rents by, fixing the interiors or the exterior. But there's always like a reason for me to be in the deal, because I know investors have options, right? They can go out, they can buy a REIT. They don't even have to invest in commercial real estate. They can put their money in the stock market where it's liquid. So there's lots of options. And so I need to have like a meaningful value proposition that's going to entice someone to go into an illiquid deal, right? If they put their money into my opportunity, for example, it's going to be very difficult to access that capital for the next 5 years or longer. It depends, right? Whatever the exit is. So that's so your question on, so why do I like, say, multifamily or development? Development, for a few years, I'm always looking for arbitrage opportunities. So I could essentially build, I'd find land and potentially rezone it or pre-lease it or pre-sell it. And I could build for cheaper than what I could go out and buy something existing, or at least on a level playing field where I was going to have a new product versus something that was 20 or 30 years old. And so I had a superior product that had the same cost base, right? And so I just looked at that as an opportunity. Today, 2020, where we're at right now, there's probably still some of those opportunities, but I believe that there will be more distressed sales. And so I'm looking at where can I, utilize my advantages once again, right? If I have equity to be able to close quickly and someone needs to sell fast and they don't want to get, jerked around and go through a long sales process with a big, investor, then they may contact me. I've got relationships that I've cultivated, and so they know I'm out looking. One of the reasons I do these podcasts, why I wrote my book, why I do a lot of training and educating, if you will. I want people to know who I am. And so if they like me and they know who I am, then they'll potentially bring me a deal. And it's proven to be a good source of deal flow and capital. And then multifamily, I think that in terms of cash flow and like the long-term perspective, and you've got demographics that are driving that sector hard, in the sense that you've got millennials that like to rent longer and I think the argument for home ownership is starting to weaken, right? I still like to own, but that's because I have 3 kids, and a lot of it is an emotional. It's not necessarily a logical reason.
Well said.
And so, and that this is just my philosophy, right? But I think you're starting to see people say, you know what, I like the flexibility of being able to be mobile, right? You're not tied to a house. The reality is, I look back over the past 11, 12 years here in Calgary, and the houses I've bought and sold, they're trading within like a 2 to 3% bandwidth. So if you paid $750,000 for a house in 2009, it's probably going to trade within 3, maybe 5% up or down from that. Yeah. And so that market appreciation that I've witnessed anyways, it's not like when I started in 2004 and the market was going straight up, right? And so, right. I could buy and fix rental properties, and I did very well because the market was climbing. Yeah. Sure, you can still do residential. My challenge is it's hard to scale. It's very difficult to find sophisticated investors because generally it's a joint venture. It's like a 1-to-1, and you just don't have that much upside, right? Even 100,000 or 200,000 sounds like a lot in a single family, but it still requires a lot of energy and time and a mortgage. When I can put that same amount of energy into a 7 or 8 figure commercial deal, it's just, yeah, that's why I've kind of transitioned and it's worked for me. And really, when you look at what the successful real estate guys are doing, they're not buying and selling homes. They're invested in cash flowing commercial real estate. Absolutely.
And I feel like a statement that needs to be made around that is also there was a school of hard knocks sort of training by being in Calgary, because it's had a long downturn for a little bit of time. The market here, real estate wise, is a bit volatile, up and down in a way, compared to other places. So here it's basically, if you survive in a way, you've made it and you can jump to the next levels, because in other markets, and I hope I'm not saying this in the wrong way, in other markets you can look like a genius because of the market.
Yeah.
If there's an upswing, you can have no sophistication and no underwriting, and the product will do well.
Yeah.
So I feel like that needs to be said as well, and that's why with what you're doing, you have to be so well thought out and strategic to have successful products here. So that's great. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll just kind of add to that, because that's a very good point, Brett. Like,
yeah.
My brother-in-law and I were talking, and maybe a couple weekends ago, and he said, Shane, the fact that you're making money in this market shows that like this is really where it will separate people that have kind of ridden the wave, mm-hmm. and really understand how to add value and how to create value, if you will. And I'll be the first to admit, like in 04 to 08, I was a gambler for the most part, a speculator, right? I mean, I took action, and so the credit, like to just taking massive action and getting out there. But the reality is I didn't have an investing philosophy. I didn't have like a true north. I didn't understand a lot of the risk that I was taking on. And I lost $250,000 in a horrible investment, trusting another quote unquote real estate guru that sold me on this opportunity. And I did it once again, jumping in without doing the proper due diligence. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, when you make those kind of mistakes, you realize that, like for me, I know I miss out on opportunities because I'm so conservative right now. And I'm looking, like, I get excited about a deal, but then I quickly look for all the reasons that it will not work. And then I ask myself, do I have the skill set to be able to, what I call de-risk the deal? How do I eliminate as much of the risk so that I can still make money if some of these negative things come to be? Right. And I would say a lot of new investors, they don't know what they don't know. And so when I ask them about their, conservative underwriting, or what happens if, the worst case scenario, their worst case scenario is still what I call a blue sky scenario, meaning everything goes right, or like, only one little bad thing happens. And so I'll rattle off 10 or 15 things I've seen over my career as a broker, a lender, a developer. And all of a sudden it's like, I didn't even think about that.
Right.
And I think that's why, it's important to have people around you that you can bounce those questions and ideas off of.
Yeah.
I mean, yesterday I talked to 3 people on various deals that I'm looking at, and just made phone calls, like, and each one of them had a different perspective. And so it's not like you need to be a lone wolf, like in residential. It is really leveraging everybody around you and not having ego, because you're likely not going to know all the answers.
Yeah, and that's such a key point. It really is a team sport, and I love that you said the ego, because there's kind of this old adage of the old kind of Mr. Burns kind of real estate investor out there, I feel like still, but in the real world, it's not like that. And those maybe aren't the people that you want to work with, because it's their way or the highway, and they are too egotistical to notice mistakes. So I love that you said that, because that is key. This, especially in commercial, it really, really, really is a team sport. Yeah. And kind of to piggyback on that a bit, why do you do syndication then? Can you explain to those out there why that's the model that you follow?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of the biggest is money, right? I mean, to be able to go out and do one of these deals, so let's say on a retail development, or the industrial, or the multifamily, they require anywhere from $2 to $4 million. And I'm not so wealthy that I can stroke a check, and nor would I probably even want to. I can tell you, like, here's what probably most people wouldn't even know. Like, because I've done business in the US, like some of the major markets down there, and in Canada, and you can go into almost any city, and you're going to see the wealthy families. Usually they've made money over generations, and or just even new people now, and they invest with in small groups. That's why I call it club syndication, my book, because they really do. And it's not to say that the average person can't participate in that, but it doesn't happen overnight. And most smart syndicators, or people that have been at it for a while, they will not just accept anybody into their deal. And the reason for that is because they don't have 50 people on staff as investor relations. This isn't like a stock brokerage house where you're fielding calls. It's like you're going to give quarterly updates. You're going to, mail out the checks and everything that's required. But the reality is, as a syndicator, your main focus is on the deal, and you just want to make sure that you're keeping your investors happy, because they won't come back into your next deal if you don't do well by them, right? So so for me, it's really a question as to how much exposure do I want in a single deal. I mean, there's billionaires here in Calgary that could stroke a check for $10 million to do their own deals, yet they will still invest with a syndicator because they want expertise, they want diversification. They just look at it differently. And there's lots of reasons, but those are a couple of big ones.
Right. And again, piggybacking off that as well, based on your experience personally and people you've worked with, what are some qualities or things that you see, especially for people who want to get into this realm? What makes a good syndicator to you?
There's a couple of things that I would say would make a good syndicator. So first is someone that takes 100% responsibility, right? I mean, I've invested with other individuals that blame the market and blame, their partner, or they blame this, and it's just like, as a person that put money into that deal, I don't care about any of that. Yeah. I gave you my money, and look, I understand that things don't always go the way that they're supposed to. I mean, it even happens in my deals, right? I've had to cash call investors. That's not fun. Yeah. But those same investors received about 48% return on their money when the deal sold. So they knew that I was doing everything I could, and I was vested, right? Another one is skin in the game. I mean, syndicators that come in and think they're going to be able to do a deal with no money or no skin, I just think that, you might be able to get away with it, but the reality is investors are smart, especially sophisticated investors. Some of the other ones, just having investing principles, non-negotiables, like where do you invest? How do you evaluate a deal? Who do you partner with? Right. There's people I won't accept their money, right? I've had people that were investors that I just don't bring back into my deals. And that's, it's not to be arrogant or cocky. It's just a reality. Like, you don't need to accept everybody or I don't know what the right word is. Like, you don't need to beg someone to come into your deal. That's unnecessary. So I just think that, I would say that those are some of the things that I would look for as a syndicator.
Yeah. And do you consider yourself an operator as well, Shane? Once you have the building, do you kind of consider yourself an operator, or
not? Like, okay, so let's differentiate a little bit, because an operator could mean a couple of different things.
Yeah.
I'm an asset manager and I have a property manager. Okay, so the property manager will handle the day-to-day, more tactical, right? Maybe interfacing with a tenant. Yeah. But as an asset manager, I'm looking at it holistically and on a big picture. So when am I getting debt? What CapEx or capital improvements need to be done to the building? If the tenant is like on a residential property, I'm not going to likely get into the negotiation. On a commercial, absolutely, right? It's because it's a big number, right? I mean, if I've got a tenant paying me $200,000 a year plus, you can bet that I'm going to have those conversations and review the lease and negotiate, sit down with them. So that's how I would define my role. But there's lots of things that a syndicator has to do, and you can't be an expert at all of it. So I have a great team, right? A bookkeeper, an accountant, a lawyer, property manager. I even have a partner that handles more of the construction. Like, I don't proclaim to be an expert at construction. I'm pretty good. Like, most people listening would probably think that I knew more than I did, because I can speak the language. But I get into these development meetings, these construction meetings, and I'm just like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because they throw around acronyms like it's just craziness. Yeah. And so I'm pretty humble. I'm just, and it's funny because sometimes they'll say, yeah, I don't know what that means. but they know what it is. They just don't know what it stands for. You know what I mean? So it's funny.
Right. So, kind of to talk about how do you see responsibility when a deal doesn't go exactly to plan? I always say, you know, when you talk to people and they claim to be experienced and they say that they've never had every deal went exactly as they planned, I always
Right.
say they're either lying or they haven't done a lot of deals.
Correct.
Nothing goes exactly as planned. You do have to think on your feet, but there's a way that you take responsibility during that time that shows the truth of who you are as an
Yeah.
investor.
Yeah.
So kind of talk about how you see things, the way things should be handled in those kind of circumstances.
Well, so markets fluctuate, right? I mean, you know, you buy a property, and like for us, we bought a property in 2013 when oil was 110 bucks. Then it goes to $30. Well, everything was going exactly as planned, right? We raised rents 110 bucks a unit. We, you know, renovated. We did everything properly. We even had an unsolicited offer. Well, all of a sudden, market changes and your rents fall, and now you have to cut distributions, and now it's all about capital preservation as opposed to being able to make distributions.
Right.
It's not a great place to be in, but it's just the reality and the truth.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is that like responsibility is the way I would kind of define it is that you are so my father-in-law, when we were going through a kind of a challenging deal, he said, "This deal will not fail." And I kept thinking to myself, like, I was pretty nervous because we could not get bank financing. It's a bit of a complicated story, but we had about an 1,150 acre development that we were working on. And our cash flow was minimal because we had so much CapEx going out, right, to develop.
Right.
And so we were always kind of behind the curve, right? You're bringing on 50 new pads to sell, and that required more money than we were bringing in. And so when you looked at the balance sheet, it wasn't sufficient to be able to borrow money. But we knew that eventually it would catch up. But it took time and it took faith. And so for me, that meant moving out there, right? I mean, I got a family here that I'm responsible for.
Wow.
But you have, in that case, we had about $9 million of equity, plus or minus. Mm-hmm. And so it was, you know, my reputation and our investors' money that were on the line, not just mine, but my partners. And so, like we said, there was no way that we could fail. And so that meant anything that needed to be done. So a sale, my GM, you know, leaves. Well, I'm doing sales. One of the property managers, you know, we have to let them go. I step in and do that. Like, it's just like, you know, it's not like, well, that's not my job. Like, everything's your friggin' job. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It didn't matter. Right. If you can't make a payment, you sit down with the general contractor and say, this is the situation. It's not burying your head in the sand and kind of hoping that they don't realize or recognize or wait for them to make the call. It's being proactive. I mean, there's just so many different ways that a person could be, quote unquote, responsible, if you will. It's just basically driving the result. I guess that's probably the best way to put it.
You know what, Shane, when I hear that, what I hear is accountability. Yeah, that's all I hear. And, you know, to put it in a typical Calgarian terms, it's get her done.
Yeah.
You know, it was your responsibility. You put on the bulletproof vest. You went out there, took the bullets, but you made sure, no matter what, because there was so much at stake, personally, professionally, and in this kind of business, they're sort of intertwined because you are your reputation. Yeah. And you made sure that there was no way that it was going to fail. And I mean, you know, everybody out there, listen to what he said. He moved out there. He has a family. He moved out there to ensure the success of this deal. But now look. So what do you think his reputation is like amongst his investors? So that's really, really, really commendable. So I wanted to kind of touch base on picking back to how you got there. But, you know, you've gone through the whole ringer now, right, Shane? Mm-hmm. Nobody knows everything, but... No. You know, people ask me this, and my answer sometimes differs day to day. But knowing what you know right now, mm-hmm. Talk to the Shane of, say, 7 years ago, and what would you tell that guy?
There's a few things I guess I would tell him. Number one, focus. I'm fortunate now because I've got the benefit of doing multiple asset classes, right? Warehouse, retail, mobile homes, mortgages. And so it's great because I have perspective on lots of different things. But frankly, had I just focused on multifamily, like I really wanted to back in, I think 2007, I put together my first deck, or 2006, even before I met my mentor,
Right.
because I was trying to buy multifamily in Edmonton.
Okay.
And I was trying to raise money from a gentleman that owned a bunch of Boston pizzas here in Calgary.
Oh,
And we would have done amazing, but maybe not, because back then I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I might have been, maybe he looked at the skill set that I had and realized that there was too much risk, right? And so that's fair. But certainly, had I focused, I would be 20 times further ahead than I am right now. So that's number one. And number two is being very careful who you partner with. I see a lot of coaches and consultants that tell that one of their sales pitches is that they will partner with the people that they coach and mentor. And I understand the rationale for that. My reluctance on doing something without having a relationship is that when you get, it's basically like saying, well, I'll marry you and I don't know you, because that's really what a partnership is.
Yeah.
And so when I coach people and there's mutual respect and we understand the expectations very clearly, there is potential to do those type of partnerships, but I never lead with that, because to me, I think that that's inviting the wrong expectations. And I've just had partners that unfortunately didn't work out, and it can be very messy and it can be expensive, time consuming. It's just, those are the two things I would say, like focus and making sure you really partner smart.
Right. Okay. So I hope everyone takes that to heart. Now, going on about coaching and bad partners and all that, I wanted to get you to speak a bit about, how people can work with you. Maybe talk about your book as well.
Sure.
It's a good read for people looking to get into that realm. It kind of pulls back the curtain a bit. It's a bit of a different perspective, but maybe talk about how they can get that book and how they can potentially work with you and what you offer that can help people succeed.
Sure. So the book itself, it's short, right? It's like 55 pages, whatever it is. And really what used to happen is I would get a lot of real estate investors, even commercial real estate brokers, asking me like, Shane, how do you syndicate your deals? And, can I pick your brain? Can I take you for coffee? Can I take you for lunch? And I love to be able to give, but the truth is you only have so much time to be able to do that. Right. And so I essentially took all my experience and then I put it into a framework on what I do, right? This isn't the only way to syndicate deals, right? There's people out there, there's way bigger books that you could buy and they'll step by step. But my experience is that it's like trying to learn to ride a bike in a book. Like there's a good sales book. You can't teach a kid to ride a bike in a seminar or something to that effect. And it's the same thing. Like you can't teach someone, in my mind, to do a syndication with a book, right? But at least it will give you enough context to be able to make a decision. You know what? This makes sense. I like this idea, this concept, and the framework makes sense to me. So that is the premise behind the book, right? Read it in an hour, 90 minutes, and then an investor can make a kind of an informed decision as to whether or not they want to proceed or no, this isn't for me, or maybe I'll be a passive investor, right? One or the other, right? Passive, active, or not for me. So that's kind of the idea behind the book. And then, probably in the last, 18 months, I've opened it up a little bit to helping real estate investors that are looking to scale, right? So maybe it's a residential investor that has 5 homes, 10 homes, 15, whatever it happens to be. And it's just difficult to scale. So they say, Shane, can you teach me how to buy multifamily? How can I buy a retail property? Like I had a physician that I helped buy a retail property here in Calgary, and he had no prior real estate experience, really. I mean, he bought one up, down, but was pretty frustrated by the whole process and the fact that he was getting, $100, $200 a month if it was full. So I showed him how to kind of transition and, with a game plan of replacing his, call it mid 6-figure income. And so he had sufficient funds and in that way he was able to, generate a fair bit of a cash flow and a monthly basis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's, the coaching or consulting that I do, it's pretty straightforward. It's for people that are driven and, like I said, take responsibility, that have some money. I don't teach no money down. I come from the world of commercial real estate, so I help people in terms of interacting with brokers, because that's where they'll get deal flow, but also how to source off-market opportunities. It's even why I'm doing some of the social media and podcasts and book and whatnot, because it reaches people and resonates with them in different mediums.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, it's how we got in touch as well.
Yeah.
And I'm so great. I'm so happy that we did. So no, that's awesome. So I'll kind of get all of the information that is needed for people to get a hold of you.
Sure.
I just want to say again, from us over here at Springport, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah.
It was great having you here, and we look forward to hopefully doing stuff in the future. And everybody out there in the world, happy investing.
Thanks.